Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, JustusRStone, here with my thoughts on Volume 3 of the light novel series Durarara. Now, this series, I have to say, is one of my favorites. It is probably because it's very unique amongst most of the series. While a lot of these series sometimes have sort of fantastical characters existing in the modern world, the story itself is more about how those characters fit in to the modern world and the hijinks that ensue. This series, it is more focused on the urban aspect, and even though there are fantastical things that occur, it's more about how they meld into the landscape and how they give birth to urban legends. And the feeling of this story is very, very different, and I really appreciate how there are different ways that the story's told in terms of there's a mixture of sometimes things are told sort of via a chat room chat. Sometimes they're just, your straight ahead prose. Other times there is actual play in terms of where the words are placed on a page, how they're grouped together to evoke a certain idea. For instance, there is sort of I don't want to spoil it, but there's this sort of repeating words that's supposed to be akin to madness, and the whole page is just filled with the words stringing all together, and it really helps give sort of this breaking up of the story, making it feel very different, the fact that it's told in these different ways, and reading it is a bit of a visual experience in that regard as well. So Durarara in general as a series so far, really a good series that I highly recommend, and that I enjoy the fact that it feels so much different than a lot of other light novels that are currently released in the English market. Now let's get right to volume number 3. Now, this one is sort of the culmination of volumes 1 and 2. Now, some mild spoilers for volumes 1 and 2. So in volume 1, we meet Mikado, who is moving into Ikebukuro for the first time. He's a country boy, and he's very naive, and we're led to believe that he's a certain type of character, and we are rather surprised when it gets to the end and we discover that he harbors this pretty big secret, which is that he's actually the organizer of this weird sort of internet/gang type thing. And then in book 2, we meet a new group, which are the Saikas, which are a bunch of individuals that are essentially brainwashed and under the control of this cursed blade and the holder of this cursed blade. And in volume number 2, that sort of leads to this big event at the end that gets this one gang, which is the Yellow Scarves, the Dollars, and then members of Saika. They all sort of clash, and none of them really knows who's responsible. And that's created a lot of tension, and that's where we begin this book, which is this sort of threat of all-out warfare between the Yellow Scarves and the Dollars. Now, arguably, the author, Ryohgo Narita, he argues that Celti, the headless motorcyclist, is the protagonist of this entire series, which I kind of see, and I see her more as the glue. But right now, these first 3 books have focused very much on 3 characters, which are Mikado, his boyfriend, his childhood friend, Masami, and Henri, which is this girl that the 2 of them sort of befriend in school. And the 3 of them each harbor these really sort of deep secrets from one another, even though they are so very, very close. And in this book, we have a whole bunch of the conflicts that have occurred through books 1 and 2, and a couple of new ones that sort of arise in this book that all sort of culminate into a final conflict that sort of exposes a whole lot of secrets, and sort of we get that sort of resolution. I wouldn't say that this book could end Durarara. There is certainly a number of sort of tidbits left along the way that show you where the series could go from here, but this definitely feels like the end point almost of these 3 characters of their storyline, and sort of sets this new status quo for them. What I really love about this series is the way that it looks at different things that we all take for granted. For instance, the way that it looks at the idea of monsters. Who are monsters and what are monsters? We have Celti, who is a headless fairy who by sort of the usual definition of monster, would be a monster. But in a lot of ways, she's one of the most humane characters in the series, and in a lot of ways has probably the strongest morals of a lot of the characters in the series. And then we have characters that are human for all intents and purposes, but we realize that their actions and so forth are incredibly monstrous. So are they the monsters? It plays back and forth with this idea of both the good and the bad, and how something, it's not all clear-cut. Love, which was a huge thing in book one, and it really has been a massive sort of theme throughout all three. It plays a big part in this one as well. We see all love in all of its different sort of permutations, and even a couple that are just bizarre that you probably wouldn't even think of. But it again takes this idea of something like love, which is usually attributed with this being a very positive thing, or an incredibly destructive thing, depending on the book, novel, the movie you're watching, what have you. But in this series, it actually looks at all of those things, and how even when it's destructive, it can be constructive, and how even when it's a good thing, there's still sort of these undercurrents of negativity to it all. So Durarara, in the same way that we have multiple characters with all these different layers of stories, and all these different layers of characters with their own sort of agendas and ideas, the book itself is multi-layered in terms of its characters. And each individual theme that we would take, whether it be the theme of monsters, whether it be the theme of love, they too are multi-dimensional, multi-layered, and have sort of these deeper complexities to them. And what's really great is that in the same way that a lot of these sort of separate storylines all combine into this novel to give us sort of a more cohesive idea of how these separate sort of players all fit together, and that there's perhaps, you know, less people pulling strings behind the scenes than we really think. The themes themselves sort of do that same thing. We have themes kind of coalescing into sort of this singular idea. In short, book number 3 really delivers for me. I thought the pacing of it was fantastic. It never dragged. It moved really quickly. It delved into the backstory of a number of characters who have been these sort of sideline ancillary characters that we haven't known a whole lot about in terms of their past, and helped give them a lot more dimension and made them far more interesting to learn about. In the afterword of this book, the author promises that the next book is going to be getting back to sort of focusing on Celti being the main character. So I'm kind of interested to see where the series goes from here, because even though there's quite a few resolutions in this book, there's still so many different things that are left open, and so many different directions that each of these characters can take. And I'm really looking forward to it, because like I said, Durarara, to me, at this point in the English release market, is pretty unique amongst most of the other light novels that are out there. So those are my thoughts on volume number 3 of Durarara. I hope you liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, because I love to see that you guys enjoy these light novel reviews. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, so that you can keep up with all my future reviews. And speaking of future reviews, I will be coming up in my next one talking about volume number 6 of Excel World. Continuing on now, it's the second volume since the sort of where the anime covered up to, and I was really pleased with book number 5, and I'm hoping that book number 6 continues that trend. So that'll be the next light novel that I review. I hope that you'll join me in that video. Until then, bye-bye for now.